adversary is preparing missiles to rain in Beijing and Shanghai, they will attack first, because they will consider the deployment of those missiles as a first strike at the strategic level, which necessitate a counter-strike on the operational level. So they will not allow us to before those missiles become ready for operation, China will hit first. So the implications of that, of those EDCA bases that can be deployed with INF missiles, is that they will be targeted also by missiles. And it can either be conventional or nuclear. But I guess if there will be fighting in this area, South China Sea, East China Sea, in Taiwan, it will easily turn nuclear, because China has the capability to sink all the aircraft carrier battle groups that the US will send. Even if they send 7 of these battle groups, like what they did in 2004, they can all be sunk. That is the capability of the assassin's mace. And if those aircraft carriers are sunk, what do you think the United States will do? They will not swallow their humiliation, and I believe that the conflict will easily turn nuclear. Now, the implication of those bases now is that, do we want those 10 bases to be the target of, say, the DF-26 with 200 kiloton of nuclear warhead each? That will be equivalent to 100 Hiroshimas, because the bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima is only 20 kilotons, or less than 20 kilotons. These are 200 kilotons each. And with those 10 bases, it will mean 100 Hiroshimas. So the question that I would like to ask our leaders is, are we prepared to allow our country to be the epicenter of a nuclear holocaust in this region? Okay, I will end there.
Thank you so much, General Victor Corpus, for that very thought-provoking and very informative, actually, very candid talk and presentation about the implications of the ongoing, well, it's a tug of war, I think, no, ongoing negotiations, especially with the additional 5 more EDCA bases, and the implication as well of the current Philippine-US defense and military cooperation, especially which involves considering the political realities of the Indo-Pacific region, and also, of course, China is part of the whole dynamics. And yes, and later probably we'll have more questions for Sir Vic. And thank you so much again, Sir Vic, for that very thought-provoking talk. But since we have to be more concerned, we have to move forward, so our time also will be maximized and we can have more time for the open forum. Let me introduce our second speaker for this forum. Our second panel of speaker is the Vice President and Director of the Center for American Studies of the Global Governance Institutions. He was also a former defense attaché of the People's Republic of China to the Republic of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Senior Colonel Wang Changwin. I hope I pronounced your name, sir, properly. Sir, you have the floor, and please proceed. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
So talking about U.S.-Philippine Defense Cooperation, we should first analyze Americans' strategy and strategic calculation in the Pacific region. As we know, U.S. enhancement of defense cooperation with the Philippines is within the broader framework of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. This year, the U.S. launched Indo-Pacific Economic Frame and Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Programs, among others. In the Indo-Pacific region, all of them putting an eye on China. This indicates that with the heating up of Sino-US competition, the US has intensified its implementation of Indo-Pacific strategy at all fronts, including military, diplomatic, economic, and maritime security. Although US Vice President Harris' visit to the Philippines had an agenda on energy and food security cooperation issues, however, defense cooperation was the real focus. For a long time, US-Philippine defense cooperation has occupied a prominent position in the bilateral relations. The US attaches great importance to the geostrategic value of the Philippines, which is not only an important part of the US island chain strategy, but also because of its location adjacent to Taiwan. The Mutual Defense Treaty signed by the US and the Philippines in the early years of the Cold War, and the Visiting Forces Agreement and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement later on, were all aimed at securing the US access to the Philippine military bases in order for the US to ensure the integrity of the first island chain system against China. At present, the US believes that the Philippine military bases can play a critical role in its future possible military intervention, and it is getting eager to press ahead with the base issues, not only to expand new space, but also to regain time lost under Duterte administration, during which not much progress was achieved in the IDSI implementation. After analyzing US strategy and its motivation, so we should say, how about the Philippines' attitude? Through the development of Philippine-US relations in the late period of Duterte administration, and since the new government took office, it is observed that the Philippines has quietly made policy change on its defense cooperation with the US. The circumstances is worth to analyze. On the one hand, the US has been pushing hard to court the Philippines by announcing clearer stance on the South China Sea dispute and the applicable ability of the US-Philippine military alliance. The US State Department issued a new South China Sea policy paper early this year, which completely negated China's territorial sovereignty and relevant rights and interests, and served to encourage relevant claimants to challenge China. The US has thrown away its cloak of neutrality and has been completely biased Since the late period of Trump administration, the US has made it clear that if the Philippines is attacked in the South China Sea, the US will invoke the US-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty to protect the Philippines. On the other hand, there is no denying that China and the Philippines have territorial and maritime dispute in the South China Sea. The two sides have managed their differences and maintained peace and stability through the bilateral consultation on the whole. However, some minor frictions and disputes still happened. Some actions taken by the Philippine side did not reach its goal. In my view, this may give the backlash for the Philippines to shift back towards greater US-Philippine defense cooperation. Since the late period of Duterte administration, and to continue to improve the defense relations with the US after the change of governments. At present, there are several emerging trends in the US-Philippine defense cooperation need to be noted. First, some forces in the Philippines are willing to play the US card and drag the latter into the South China Sea issue and offer to contact joint patrols with the US in the South China Sea, for example. With the US meddling in, the situation in the South China Sea will not keep generally quiet. Joint patrol, as we know, was explicitly prohibited under the previous administration for fear of provoking conflicts with China, and was viewed not conducive to the development of friendly and cooperative relations between the two countries, and also harmful to the regional peace and stability. Under the previous administration, the Philippine military did not conduct joint patrols with the US military in the South China Sea, and the Philippines made it clear that it would not allow US military ships and planes to use the Philippine bases as springboard to patrol the disputed waters in the South China Sea. Moreover, the previous administration restricted joint military exercise with the US to focus on disaster response rather than amphibious island defense and assault, and to distance the exercise venues from waters of the South China Sea. Second, the two sides are ready to further expand the military bases in the Philippines for the use of the US. The new bases under discussion are reportedly closer to disputed areas in the South China Sea, and also include the new bases in the northern part of the Philippines, facing China's Taiwan Island across sea. As far as the US is concerned, its access to Philippines bases would allow it to enjoy convenience in military actions in both directions of the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. If the new base plan materialized, the Philippines may in fact be directly involved in disputes and possible conflicts between China and the United States over Taiwan. Third, there seems to be a worrying trend that the US and the Philippines are getting used to and accept kind of the approach of trade-off. Approaching of trade-off, a kind of deal. Just like US security expert Gregory Pauling said, If the US is going to go to the mat for the Philippines had to go to the mat for the Americans. To put it straight, or more clear, that is to say, if Philippines want the Americans to help in the South China Sea, Philippines should help an American in Taiwan. In my view, that could push things in a more uncertain direction. The trade-off may be that the Philippines wants the US to further support its posture and operations in the South China Sea, while the Philippines is willing to go as far as possible with US demands for bases, regardless of how much that would impair the third party's interests. This can be seen from the interviews by some important persons of the Philippine diplomatic circle. It is no exaggeration to say, if the current situation continues, the Philippines will in fact tie itself to the American chariot. This is not only detrimental to the development of Sino-Philippine-friendly cooperative relations, but may also adversely affect the security of the Philippines itself. So right now, it seems that Sino-Philippine relation is entering a new phase where possible test is perhaps awaiting. Under new circumstances, both sides need to draw experience from the long history of bilateral relations. The more we recall history, the less trouble we would encounter in terms of bilateral relations. The history of China-Philippine relations shows that when the two countries develop their relations independently without external interference, bilateral relations can move in a healthy way. When the fundamental interests of the two peoples are taken as the starting point to develop mutually beneficial and win-win practical cooperation, bilateral relations will grow steadily. When problems between the two sides are solved through bilateral mechanisms, the development of bilateral relations can rest on solid basis. When President Duterte took office, China and the Philippines agreed to solve the difference on the South China Sea by means of direct and friendly talks. This established the political foundations for bilateral relations. Finally, I would like to say the current economic and trade cooperation and infrastructure cooperations between China and the Philippines are generally moved smoothly. China has overcome the adverse impact of the epidemic, steadily advanced major infrastructure projects in the Philippines, and achieved important results. At this moment, we sincerely hope don't let other factors interfere with the good cooperation that has never been easily come. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Senior Colonel Wang, for that equally extensive and very also thought-provoking presentation or short talk. Probably later we'll have more questions as well for Colonel Wang. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we should move on to the next speaker. Friends and colleagues, our third speaker is an internationally recognized development economist based in Singapore. His primary research interest includes global economic development, ASEAN-China relations, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. He's also a senior visiting research fellow at the Cambodia Institute for Cooperation and Peace. and also an adjunct research fellow at the Integrated Development Studies Institute. Without further ado, let us welcome Dr. Henry Chan. Dr. Chan, you have the floor and you may proceed with your talk. Thank you so much. Dr. Henry, are you there? Where's Dr. Henry?
Unmute, Henry.
Please unmute Dr. Henry. I think he's a co-host, no? So he can unmute. Yeah, Dr. Henry, please unmute. You're a co-host. You can unmute yourself. Josh, please unmute Dr. Henry.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much to Herman and Anna for the invitations. And I will share with you the view from the region, because we know for the fact that ASEAN is the most important organizations for the small Southeast Asian countries. First is this: when we look at this extended defense cooperation agreement and the visit of Vice President Harris to Palawan, we are still keeping a very cool pace. We are still watching it closely because, first, the most important is that China is not reacting yet. So we also take note of some historical facts. The first thing is that if you look at the Philippine history, Philippines is traditionally the closest U.S. ally in Southeast Asia. And if you look at ASEAN, Philippines is the only one to have a very serious military alliance relationship with the United States. And I think both ASEAN member states and China recognize these historical facts. It's not just military cooperations. Actually, it is more an emotional and psychological linkage. Because militarily, after the Vietnam War, Philippine bases has been quiet. So the military relationship is just a standby facilities. But the emotional and psychological attachment of the Philippines to the U.S. is something that you have to take into considerations. And all the ASEAN members in China take note of it. If you look at the Philippines, because of the very messy internal politics situation at times, so you will see the Philippine foreign relations, particularly in the Philippine-China relationship, gone through a wide swing with each president. If you remember the position of President Arroyo, and then go to President Aquino, and then the President Duterte, and now the President Marcos, you will see a sharp swing, which is something very unusual in Asian politics. Because in Asian politics, normally continuity is the norm. But in the case of the Philippines, foreign relations, abrupt changes seems to be rather present. Now, why are we so cool is that because number one, China is not reacting openly yet. And second is that the most important thing here, as General Corpus and Senior Colonel Wang has pointed out, is what is the exact content of these military cooperations. China never said it's opposed to the U.S.-Philippine defense treaties, but definitely the visit of President Harris, and as Colonel Wang has pointed out, more and more of these bases is situated closer and closer to Taiwan and closer to South China Sea. These are all politically very sensitive areas. So Southeast Asian countries are looking closely at what Philippines will do. Now, if we talk about ASEAN stand, it's very clear. ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific was unanimously adopted by all the 10 ASEAN member states in November 2019. If you look at the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, it emphasized inclusivity. That means no country should be shut out. And number two, they talk about South China, and they always said negotiation should be the way to go. Okay? And amazingly, if you look at President Biden in his Phnom Penh visit, the United States affirmed its support of the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, which is totally different from the Indo-Pacific strategy of the Americans. Now, how the U.S. is going to fulfill it and what it is meaning, everybody's guess. But again, ASEAN position is very clear. ASEAN should be a place of peace, with economic development taking the precedence, and global common items such as climate change, digital transformations, and public health. If you look at the free communicate in the free meetings, in the Bali Summit, in the Phnom Penh Summit, in the Bangkok Summit, all this is adopted by all the member participants. Even the war at Ukraine and Russia received just a one paragraph mention in all the free summit declarations. So to ASEAN, we are watching whether the coming visit of President Marcos in early January and the renewal of the extended defense cooperation agreement in April this year will signal an escalation of conflict in South China Sea. Now, as the saying goes, the devil is in the details. Now, there are so many things in this extended extension of the defense cooperations that I'm sure all ASEAN countries and China want to know. But the highlight of these points. First is that, will there be a joint naval patrol, as somebody has suggested before? And number two, when you have this naval patrol, you have a very serious problem. In the 1987 Philippine constitutions, the Philippines territory is defined within the 200 nautical miles from the continental shelf. It's running into the area of China, it's running into the area of Taiwan, it's running into the area of Vietnam, and I'm not so sure whether it runs into the area of Malaysia. Now, the latest news from the U.S. Center of Strategic and International Studies is that in the last few months, Vietnam has reclaimed the 9 islands that it occupied from the original 300 hectares to now 1,300 hectares. In the last few months, Vietnam has reclaimed 1,000 hectares. And if this lies in the Philippine waters, based on the 1987 Philippine Constitution definitions, what will this mean to the regional peace? So it can become not just a China-Philippine conflict, it can blow into a full-scale ASEAN, intra-ASEAN conflict also. Second, in this new extension of the bases from 5 to 10, is going to be the operational control of the Philippines on this basis. Is it just a military depot, or the U.S. will permanently station fighters, logistic planes, bombers, military vessels into these bases? And the U.S. today enjoy unhampered use, which is the normal U.S. bases provisions. Or they operationally have to get the permission of the Philippine government when they are going to use these bases in the conflict area. So this is a second very important point. Now, everybody knows that in the Biden-Xi conversation or whatever high-level conversations, China always say that Taiwan issue is the red line of the red line. And China has repeatedly said that they are even going to war if anybody touches Taiwan issues. Now, that's going to be an anomaly on international relations and laws. Because when China established diplomatic relationship with any countries, they always ask you to affirm the so-called one China policy. Now, what is the essence of one China policy? It just states, first point, there's only one China. Second is that Taiwan is part of China. The third is that the legal government of China is Beijing. Okay, now if you follow these logics, then that means Thailand affairs, China considered an strictly internal affairs, which supposedly any country who has diplomatic relationship with China subscribe to that view. Now, how are Philippines going to take that if in case of the Taiwan conflict, US will use the Philippine bases as supporting bases or even launching ground for its aircraft? Then that will really be a very serious issue because in military circles, preemptive strike is an affected military doctrine. And that is going to be very, very serious in political implications. So ASEAN now is waiting. We are waiting for first, the visit of President Marcos to Beijing next month. Second, on the terms that will be diverged in the April renewal of the military bases agreement. Now, today, there is a very good article by a Filipino journalist working for Strict Times, Mr. Benjamin Lim, and his title is President Marcos is running an easy hard-war balancing act when he visits China next month. Now, and all we are international scholars, we understand that at the end, it is the definition of national interest that supposedly will dictate your foreign policy inclinations. Now, unfortunately, we are living in a very, very unusual time. The current German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has written a very good article in Foreign Affairs. The title is "The World is Facing a Sentence Middle," which means turning point. The world is facing a turning point, and it's an epochal tectonic shift in which, as expected, China is very high on the list, and is that we should look for places that we can engage while defending our value. Now, the ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific in the German Chancellor's paper already it's very clear that we are living in a new era in which industrial revolutions is changing the pictures of everything. And General Corpus has already talked about the second strike capability of China. And if you look at what the Russian-Ukraine war has shown, if you talk about precision ammunitions, if you talk about drone warfares, if you talk about autonomous weapons, now the US Defense Department has already stated openly that China is the peer competitors. And many military analysts has already opinion that China might not be so far behind the US. In fact, if you remember that a sea-based weapon system is always half to one generation behind the land-based system. So the outcome of any potential conflicts could be very disastrous to anyone involved. And China might not be the losing side. And that is very important when any country is going to make its military posturings. So this is the things I can share with the audience. I'm not an expert like General Corpus or Colonel Wang, but I do know a little bit about the new development, because the weaponry system is always the surprise element. When industrial revolution happens, and it always introduces an unexpected new dimension to war. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wait, let me accept this person. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Henry, for sharing with us the Southeast Asian perspective on the issue, or on the Philippines-US defense and military cooperation. And thank you as well for giving us that enlightening talk and presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's proceed and let us have our next speaker. Our next speaker is the president of the Philippine Society for Intelligence and Security Studies, and the chairman of the Philippines Institute for Peace, Violence, and Terrorism Research. He teaches at the Department of International Studies at Miriam College in Manila, Philippines. Also, this coming January 2023, he will serve as the Professor of International Relations and Chairman of the Board of Advisors, China Studies Center, School of International Relations at the New Era University. It's in Manila, the University in Manila, of course, in the Philippines. He's also a former fellow of the Hawaii-based Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, let us welcome Dr. Romel Banlawi. Dr. Romel Banlawi, please proceed with your presentation. You have now a permission to share screen. Please proceed. Thank you. Naka-mute ba?
Naka-mute mute
Oo.
pa.
Please unmute Dr. Banlawi, and I think Dr. Banlawi is a co-host, and you can unmute yourself, Romel. Yeah, he's a
Okay,
co-host.
thank you. I was not able to unmute myself, but thank you very much, Anna and Herman, for the kind invitation. But let me share my screen. Okay, so please give me some time. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, we can see
Very
it.
good.
Everyone
Okay,
can
very
see it.
good. Okay, so what I would like to discuss on the basis of the question sent to me is to describe Philippines American Defense Alliance in the context of what I call the flexible Philippine foreign policy. That is, I think, is the foreign policy approach now of President Marcos Jr. and how President Marcos Jr. is balancing its relations with the United States and China. So when American Vice President Kamala Harris visited the Philippines last November 21 to 22, he reaffirmed the value of Philippine-American Security Alliance. In fact, I described her visit to the Philippines as a kind of assurance visit in order to reaffirm the importance of the Philippine-American Alliance. And even Vice President Harris emphasized that the United States stands with the Philippines against any type of coercion in the South China Sea. So although Vice President Kamala Harris said that her visit was purely for the promotion of Philippine-American Defense Alliance, but it is always attached with the issue of the South China Sea, especially when he delivered this speech affirming Philippines' commitment to support the Philippines in the case of armed conflicts in the South China Sea. Okay. And Harris' trip to the Philippines was so controversial as she went to the city of Puerto Princesa in Palawan, where a U.S. military facility under Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement is built. And this facility is facing the West Philippine Sea. And if you will look at the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, 5 locations have already been built and being further developed in Antonio Bautista Air Base in Palawan, Basa Air Base in Pampanga, Fort Magsaysay in Nueva Ecija, Lumbia Airport in Cagayan de Oro, and Benito Ibuen Air Force in Mactan, Cebu. I have visited these 5 locations prior to the pandemic, and it was still under development, but I suppose now that these 5 major locations are already operational. And in fact, Vice President Harris' visit to the Philippines was made in the context of U.S. Intention to expand the scope of their locations in the Philippines by proposing additional EDCA locations in Cagayan, Isabela, Zambales, and Palawan. And they are proposing 2 facilities to be constructed in Cagayan. Okay, so and to implement EDCA under the administration of President Ferdinand Marcos, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson, also disclosed the plan of Washington, D.C. to provide Manila at least 70 million worth of military assistance to the Philippines in the next 2 years. And the Philippines Defense Department stressed that EDSA sites are primarily earmarked for humanitarian assistance and disaster response, especially construction of facilities, training facilities, warehouses, and operation centers for these purposes. But if you will look closely to the location of these areas are some of the country's top strategic locations that can effectively facilitate U.S. military activities in major flashpoints of armed conflicts in Asia, especially in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Straits, and the Korean Peninsula. And if you will look back earlier, the Marine Corps of the Philippines and the United States concluded last October the 6th Kamandag exercises. And these exercises that kicked off last October have reaffirmed the continuing relevance of Philippine-American Security Alliance amidst global security uncertainties, particularly in the context of continuing tensions in the South China Sea. And after that, before that, President Marcos visited New York City in order to attend the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. And on the sideline, he met President Joe Biden. And during their face-to-face meeting, President Marcos acknowledged the paramount role of the U.S. in maintaining regional security in Asia, particularly in the South China Sea. So Marcos stressed that the Philippines always considered the United States as Philippine partner, an ally, and our friend. And he even told Biden that the role of the United States in maintaining peace in the region is something that is much appreciated by all. by all countries in the regions and the Philippines especially. So if you will look at these developments, apparently Marcos is truly revitalizing Philippine-American alliance with the United States, Philippine-American Security Alliance, which was downplayed by his predecessor, President Rodrigo Duterte. Biden even admitted that under Philippines-US relations, admitted that under Duterte, Philippine-American security relations suffered some rocky times. But their alliance is so critical that Biden has reassured Marcos Jr. that the U.S. commitment to the Philippines as an American ally has always been rock solid. Marcos Jr.'s recent efforts to pursue closer ties with the U.S. has been inaccurately interpreted by many analysts and pundits as the Philippines pivot to the United States, okay, Manila's only security ally in the world. As an ally, the Philippines continues to benefit from American security umbrella in Asia, especially in the midst of growing security tensions in the South China Sea, where the Philippines commit to defend its territories in West Philippine Sea, where the Calayan Island Group and the Scarborough Shoal are located. And being an American ally, the U.S. Embassy in Manila says that the Philippines has remained as the largest recipient of U.S. military assistance in the Indo-Pacific region despite Duterte's paradigm shift to China. In February 2022 alone, the United States has delivered at least $1.4 billion worth of planes, armored vehicles, small arms, and other military equipment and training facilities to the Philippines, as shown in the slide. So I will not discuss the breakdown of this military assistance, but the United States is telling the Philippine government that it continues to provide military assistance in the Philippines despite rocky times during the Duterte administration, and it had intention to further improve this military assistance under President Marcos Jr. In other words, pursuing closer ties with the U.S. provides many benefits for the Philippines to advance its national interest. But to say that Marcos Jr. is pivoting to the U.S. as part of its foreign policy is utterly inaccurate. Marcos Jr., for me, is just diversifying its relations with major powers, being friendly to all. In fact, the Philippines under Marcos Jr. wants China ties to shift to a higher gear under his presidency. So Marcos is not pivoting to the U.S. because China still looms large in the foreign policy agenda of the Philippine government. Marcos Jr. is pursuing closer ties with the U.S. not at the expense of China. He still has the marching order to shift Philippines' relations with China to a higher gear. He even recognizes China as the Philippines' strongest partner. As a result of that, Marcos is planning to visit China on January 3 to 6 next January, to promote comprehensive strategic cooperation. And in my analysis, there is even a talk about the two countries to explore the possibility of pursuing a strategic partnership, because among countries in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Philippines is the only country in ASEAN that has not yet established a strategic partnership agreement with China. Our relationship with China is only at the level of comprehensive strategic cooperation, and there is expectation that the President Xi Jinping will explore the possibility of elevating Philippines-China relations to a strategic partnership. Okay, so like the United States, China continues to be one of the Philippines' largest trading partners. So if you will look at the statistics produced by the Philippine Statistics Office, China continues to be the number one Philippine exports, the number one source of destination of Philippine exports, as shown in the diagram. And also, China continues to be the largest source of Philippine imports, okay, as of March 2022. In other words, there are a lot of economic advantages of pursuing friendly relationship with China, and Marcos Jr.'s attempt to strengthen its alliance with the United States is not pursued at the expense of Philippines-China relations. In short, the Philippines under Marcos Jr. is not pivoting to the U.S. against China despite the attempts of the two countries to strengthen their defense cooperation. The Philippines, for me, is just pragmatically balancing its relations with the U.S. and China in order to get the best of both worlds. for the advancement of Philippine national interest, which is the cornerstone of an independent foreign policy that is based on strategic flexibility, if not strategic ambiguity. And I call this kind of foreign policy as flexible foreign policy. And this kind of policy is practiced by most members of ASEAN, like Indonesia, Malaysia, and even Singapore and Thailand, as well as other developing countries like Libya and Pakistan. Flexible foreign policy unleashes the ability of the states to bend with the wind like bamboos in the forest in order to survive. This policy pursues a bamboo diplomacy that harnesses states' propensity to adapt to the changing situation and is cautious of consequences of states' action. So in conclusion, I would like to argue that policy is not guided by any hardline political ideologies, but only by the mantra of national interest. Flexible foreign policy is a statecraft, deeply informed by the cardinal rule in international politics that there are no permanent friends nor permanent enemies, but only permanent interests. Flexible foreign policy is what defines the foreign policy of Marcos Jr. administration in order to balance its relations with the US and China in the context of the reshaping of the Asia-Pacific security architecture. I think that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Good day.
Good day. Thank you so much, Dr. Romel Banlawi, for that very instructive and at the same time extensive and very enlightening presentation as well. So let's proceed, no, so that we can have more time for the open forum, since it's, I mean, time flies so quick. It's already 4:11. So let's proceed with our next speaker. Our last but not the least speaker for today's online forum is the founder and president of the Manila-based think tank, the International Development and Security Cooperation. He teaches in graduate school at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He previously held the position of Vice President for the Center of Research and Strategic Studies and the Executive Fellow at the Development Academy of the Philippines. He is also a lecturer at the National Defense College of the Philippines and the Command and General Staff College. He has published in peer-reviewed journals in the purview of security studies and recently co-authored a book entitled The Rise of Philippinization. Philippinization is not Finlandization. Friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Chester Cabalsa. Dr. Cabalsa, please proceed with your presentation. Thank you. If you need some, would you be sharing a slide, Dr. Cabalsa?
Unmute Joshua.
Please unmute Dr. Cabalsa and make him a co-host as well. And if in any case he needs to share a screen, please give him the permission. Thank you. Chester, are you there? Yeah. Are you unmuted already? Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Anna, for that kind introduction, and thank you very much to Sir Herman for inviting me. First of all, I'm happy to see Colonel Wang. He was the defense attaché of the Philippines when I studied in Beijing. So we met before, way back in 2011. And allow me to share my presentation. This is just a 4 slides because a lot of things have been said already. And maybe the paradigm that I would like to share with you is, I think I don't know why I cannot share it yet. But the paradigm that I would like to share it with you is to look at the economic and, of course, the diplomatic and defense implications of these Philippines U.S.
Wait, Dr. Cabalsa, I'm requesting Josh to give you a permission to share the screen. Just 1 minute. Josh, kindly.
It's okay, ma'am. If we can, so that we can consume the time. Because I know that, let me just speak. But in the recent lecture that I had with the National Defense College, I posited the question of the last battle of the Global North. Of course, we know the composition of the Global North. This is led by the U.S. and some of the Western powers there. But nonetheless, it's a thesis that we're trying to prove or disprove that kind of proposition. China is not doing. China has been consistent all the way, starting when I studied in Beijing up to now on what they want, and even with that, the West, the global North, basically is rattled by what China is standing so far. But nonetheless, why is it the Indo-Pacific? Why is it that the global North is trying, particularly led by the United States, is trying to withdraw their strategy, and all of a sudden they have this Indo-Pacific strategy? And we have also heard about the formations of the Quad and the AUKUS. And there must be something why this recomposition of strategies and formations of alliances in the region. And definitely, it's like an Avengers movie where they think that China is a very formidable force that they want to contain, or maybe they want to challenge and contest, because things have changed. If you try to notice, 2030, that's only 8 years from now, things will change. Emerging markets from Asia, which was expounded already by Sir Herman, that a lot of emerging economies in our region will become the richest countries in the world. And if you listen to the narratives of the Americans, they are in that state of denial that perhaps they are being demoted perhaps in the future in terms of their economic performance. We will see the rise of China becoming perhaps the #1 global economy, and then we don't know if the United States will slide down to perhaps becoming #2 or #3. But in the power contestation, and in that formation of power relations, economics plays a major role. Particularly, of course, once you have wealth, you can sophisticate and modernize your armed forces. And we know for a fact that, of course, China has the sovereign right to modernize its armed forces, and because of that, maybe the global North has been intimidated by that. And that's the reason they're trying to withdraw their strategy, and they start to have that Indo-Pacific strategy, and of course conveying also their alliance with India and some of the Asian powers, and of course extending to Australia and Oceania. But the point there is, you have the Philippines, which sits in a very unique position geographically and politically, strategically. We know for a fact that the Philippines is the longest treaty ally of the United States. But our military pact and military treaties with the United States are not perfect. And there are a lot of loopholes. That's the reason why we're trying to review some of our bilateral relations with them, because we think that there is that asymmetrical relationship. And we know for a fact that even among the Americans, they had that repentant narrative also of what they miss in some of their strategies in the previous administrations, during the time of Obama, and then during the time of Trump, and now with the Biden administration. And all of a sudden, it's also an economic competition, because they know that China has been successful in its Belt Road Initiative offer, and now they have that Indo-Pacific economic framework. But a lot of member countries in the region, particularly the Indo-Pacific, are asking a lot of provisions or the pledges of the Americans when it comes to their economic projects with us, in which case China has been a bit successful in drawing its economic plans and some of its programs for countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So even if, let's say, that the Philippines-US defense relationship will be maintained and will continue to go on, given that, of course, the military pact is alive, and it has been approved, unless the Philippines will, of course, will not do its obligations. That's the death of the treaty, basically. Then that's the reason why the Americans are basically back and are trying to become more aggressive again, because they wanted to redeem themselves because of the many loopholes, perhaps vulnerabilities that they have seen in our defense bilateral relationship with the Philippines. Now, what is the prognosis, the projections, basically? Of course, we see a power competition between China and the United States, particularly that the future of the world is the Indo-Pacific. And the West has been redrawing their strategies of the Indo-Pacific. Countries in the ASEAN still don't have their Indo-Pacific strategies because they are perhaps actors. That's the reason why they don't see drawing or mapping their own Indo-Pacific strategy. And we know for a fact that ASEAN has been a recipient of the benevolence of the Americans and the Chinese at the same time in terms of their economic programs with us, and also with the defense programs within the region. But hopefully, which I like what Colonel Wang has mentioned, that given this power competition, we should have to strive to continue with that space for prosperity and cooperation, because no one would want war, although we will see a lot of conflicts, perhaps because of the epicenter now of the world would be our region. And I guess that I like also what Dr. Chan mentioned about Taiwan. The Taiwan is the red line of the red line. Basically, don't touch Taiwan. So that is something that we have to look at also, considering that we know also the power relations that are being played right now in the region. So it's very crucial. We need to. I like this platform because we are able to convey our ideas, discuss, and maybe think of alternative ways on how to resolve these issues and problems. Because definitely, it's not only the U.S. that can resolve this problem. China is a big actor in the region, and we will see that in the future. We should have to recognize that. And I really welcome the even in the media I've been telling that President Marcos should really go to Beijing on January, because right now we just heard the narratives of the Americans, the point of view, the perspectives of the Americans. We have to hear what China wants for the Philippines, and China should hear also what we want, so that there should be a comprehensive narrative while we are trying to carve our own policies, foreign policy. So I'll end it there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cabalsa, for that also very illuminating presentation or short talk. I'm sorry you were not able to share your slide, but I think what you have said is very clear. And I think everyone understood the message that you want to post to everyone, and especially to the participants of this forum. So let's move on to the next part. This is, I think, the most exciting part as well of the forum. This is the open question and answer. I have collected some questions here. I will try to manage the time as much as possible because it's already 4 o'clock and 22 minutes, but we will end at around 5 o'clock. I think we have 2 hours of this forum. So I think I would address the first question to Professor Banlawe. Professor Banlawe, you have said that what is going on right now when you talk about foreign policy, and I think other people as well, other experts who are the members of the panel of speakers can actually contribute to the discussion on for this question. But let me address first to the question to Professor Banlawe. You've said that the current administration has what you call flexible foreign policy. How flexible it will be, and how flexible it could be, and at the same time, what's the implication of that when you talk about pursuing a genuine and meaningful independent foreign policy, basing it on what you call national interests of the Philippines? What's the boundary of being flexible? Because we cannot be flexible all the time, especially when you talk about foreign, the geopolitical consideration and the realities in the Indo-Pacific region. So kindly, please address the question, and also the other panel of speakers can also actually share their ideas. Thank you. Professor Banlawe? Please unmute Professor Banlawe. Are you unmuted now?
President Marcos Jr.
Yes, the current administration. Did you did you get the question? No.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. You're loud and clear.
Okay, I did not get the question. Because
Okay. The question is like this. As earlier in your presentation, you have mentioned that the current administration foreign policy, based on your analysis, no, and your, of course, of your discussion earlier, it's what you call flexible foreign policy. Now, the question being posted to you is how flexible it could be and how flexible would it be? What's the boundary of flexibility? And is it the same of, in terms of essence, is it the same of what you call independent foreign policy or meaningful independent foreign policy? So, and how it is in terms of operation?
That remains to be seen because we're still in the infancy stage of the government under Marcos Jr. administration. So let's see how flexible will be the government under the leadership of Bongbong Marcos. But I think his flexibility is very different from President Duterte because President Duterte, during his time, played the China card against the United States. You know, the anti-American rhetoric of President Duterte. But under Marcos Jr. administration, he is playing a strong American card, not at the expense of China. Okay, but to strengthen Philippine leverage to pursue quote-unquote friendly consultations with China. So he is not playing the American card against China, but he is playing the American card to strengthen Philippine leverage to deal with China. Unlike Duterte administration, he played the China card at the expense of our alliance with the United States.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Banlawe. Anyone from the panel of experts, before I ask the next question, you can actually also share your ideas, no, and perspective about this analysis, no, that we are having a flexible foreign policy at this time around under President Marcos Jr. Yes, Dr. Cabalsa. Yes, please. Dr. Chester, you're a co-host already. I think all the speakers should be co-hosts, no, so that they can unmute themselves. Yes, Dr. Chester.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with the framework presented by Dr. Abanlawi on the flexible foreign policy. But I guess there should be a timeline for that. Until when we will do that, because that would be costly for the Philippines. Because we know for a fact that China's rise is inevitable. President Marcos's term will end by 2028. By that time, we do not know that China would already be the #1 economy in the world. So if we keep on balancing until the end of his term, then what would be the benefits that we can get from China at the same time? So I mean, if we are trying to be pragmatic here, it will come a time during his administration that we will really have to choose. And that is very sad for us because we are forced into a geopolitical situation where we really have to rethink and redesign our independent foreign policy in such a way that it would also benefit the national interest of the Philippines. So that is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cabalsa. Yes, Dr. Banlawe. Anyone can just speak, no? One at a time. Yes.
Yes, I support Dr. Cabalsa, no, for raising his concern. And in fact, that is the real risk of balancing. And in the act of balancing, sometimes you tip to the left, you tip to the right. Okay, it's very difficult really to maintain the real balance. So let's see how the situation will look like, whether in the future the Philippine government will tip more to China or tip more to the United States. So let's see how it goes. But we have to really be mindful of the risks associated with this balancing. But as I said during my presentation, that the real measure of flexible foreign policy is the mantra. That is no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interest. And at the end of the day, the Philippines should advance its national interest. And if it is forced to choose, although right now we don't want to choose between the two major powers, but if we are forced to choose, we have to choose in favor of Philippine national interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Balawe, Dr. Balawe, and Dr. Cabalsa. Anyone from the...
I think Henry Chan is raising his hand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please.
I definitely agree with Romel and Chester. And I think that all the ASEAN countries have that policy of flexible diplomacy, because it's very clear that economically we want to ride the China development, but militarily we don't want US to leave. And yesterday, 2 days ago, the former Singapore Foreign Minister, George Yu, has a very interesting interview. And he said that he advised China to become more accommodating in the code of conduct negotiations, but he also advised the United States to tone down the military presence in the South China Sea. Now, the key thing, I think, is the January visit. I'm sure the President, Marcos Jr., will invite President Xi Jinping to visit the Philippines. And I'm sure that President Xi Jinping will, based on his decision to visit the Philippines at the earliest moment, depending on what is the outcome of the April EDCA discussion extensions. And the Romeo already shows a very good PowerPoint about the original intention of EDCA. If there's no expansion of the basis on the EDCA functions, I think everybody expects China and ASEAN countries to be very happy accepting it. But once the boundary already crossed the military line, then to be fair about everybody, is that in international relationships, the last thing that a country will yield is always national territory and national security interests. So definitely, I think that probably by the end of April, we will have a much better answer of how will be the future course of the relationship between China and Philippines. These are just my 2 cent ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chan. If there's no one will... Colonel Wang. Yes, Colonel Wang, please feel free. I don't see everyone. Probably.
You have to unmute
please unmute him. Unmute everyone. All the speakers so that they can freely talk. Yeah, please, Colonel Wang, please proceed. Yeah.
It's still muted.
Because my next... He is unmuted already, right?
No, it's still muted.
Yes. No. Colonel Wang is not yet unmuted. Colonel Wang, you can unmute. Well, I will unmute him.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Balawe's definition of current administration's foreign policy using the term as flexible diplomacy is quite interesting. And also that showing some kind of comparison with his predecessors' foreign policy that we define, and everybody may define as an independent foreign policy under Duterte administration. So every country pursues its national interest by what means. I think that is the right of the country itself. But here, we just want to make clear that pursue the national interest freely and moving freely and tactically between big powers to gain more interest. That is not bad, only if it is not against third parties' interest. And also, this flexible diplomacy should have boundary, should have the principle. As we know, China and the Philippines established diplomatic relations on some important political foundations, such as mutually respect territorial integrity, sovereignty, and also we have important consensus, political consensus on Taiwan. Everybody should recognize, I mean, every country, if you would like to have a normal relation with China, should recognize Taiwan is part of China. You should not do anything to harm China's core interest in terms of Taiwan. So at this moment, if you moving or pivoting to the US, just by using something to quote US, that will just not as somebody or Dr. Dalawi just mentioned that will not at the expense of China, but as a matter of fact, that would be at the expense of China. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Wang.
If I
Yes,
may add, Madam Ana.
Yes. Comment on. Go ahead.
I'm actually very uncomfortable with the so-called ambiguity in our foreign policy, because ambiguity has its many perils. When the other nations, especially in a situation where conflict may arise, are not sure of the position of a country. And I am also very uncomfortable with what is now very frequently used, friend to all and enemy to none, as if there is no virtue upon which a relationship and a position will be based. Even a tightrope artist maintains a fixed position, standing on the wire, and only balances just to stay on that wire, not to be obtuse about where he stands. Aristotle said that it is possible to be a friend to all if you're just trying to be a nice person. But if you're standing on virtue, then you have to choose the virtuous friends. And I think the ambiguity, or sometimes the balancing so-called of ASEAN countries is lending to the legitimacy of the unvirtuous position of the United States, which is to create chaos, tension, and war. And we have seen, and there are enough proof of this. I think the Philippines has to stand strongly and firmly on the virtue, and that is peace for the region. I think the actions have been taken by the regional members in ZOPAM, Zone of Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality, and the Southeast Asian nuclear weapons-free zone. Those are very clear positions. It is the Philippines with all these trappings of so-called balancing that accommodates the United States in these unsavory cooperation projects that is clearly aimed at an enemy and preparing for ultimate conflict that the Philippines and the region will lose in, not the United States, which is 10,000 miles away. And that has always been the strategy of the United States. Keep wars away from its shores by creating wars across the world. I think now the Philippines should make that position, especially after President Duterte has already provided the space to make this very firm, virtuous stand on this matter. And there is nothing to gain in the relationship with the United States. That is, what do they donate? Military material that crush and kill our soldiers. They're at best the second largest trading partner, which includes the military sales to the Philippines, and possibly maybe the third trading partner of the Philippines. There is not much to gain from the United States. The only person who has a lot to gain right now by shifting the policy of President Duterte, which was firmly for the protection of the real national interests and regional interests, because national and regional interests is peace. The only person benefiting from the shift to a congenial relationship with the United States is President BBM and the family, which I personally will state. So I suspect to be because of some dealings that they are arranging with the United States. Because there is no other motivation. It is a step backwards for the virtuous position of the Philippines, which is peace and prosperity. And any attempt to flirt with tension and war harms the prospects of peace and prosperity. That's my humble view of this matter.
Thank you, Kamentong. I think this is a very interesting discussion. We have different views coming from our different experts, including Kamentong, on this perspective. But I think from my side, no, because I'm also a geopolitics and to a certain extent an international relation practitioner and enthusiast. I think when you talk about the what do you call that, flexible foreign policy, I think what is important in there, as some of our experts have said, is the boundary. Until when will you be flexible, and how could you be flexible? Especially, and I think one important thing that Colonel Wang have said that I think our leaders, Philippine leaders, should be mindful about is, I don't think China is against relationship of one country of the Philippines to other countries, but I think China is more on that it should not be targeting a third party. I think that's a very important input coming from Colonel Wang. Okay, I have the next question, because earlier EDCA was mentioned several times now, and we know that EDCA, I think, will be ending by 2023. So what do you think of this? Because EDCA is actually, you have very important issues that is related to EDCA. You have these 5 additional bases, EDCA bases, which are U.S. military bases that are being requested to be put up or installed in our own military bases, Philippine military bases, and the U.S. is pushing for it, and it's still under negotiation, I think, and the current administration did not. I don't think there is a decision already on that. But what do you think of it? Because it's ending by 2023, and it's either President BBM will be pushing for it, or will just terminate it and let it end. So what's your perspective vis-a-vis the geopolitical considerations that we have to think about, and vis-a-vis China? So I think this is for Philippine experts more, and of course Colonel Wang can chime in, and of course Dr. Henry coming from Singapore also can give your perspective on this. This is a critical issue at the moment because it's under discussion. Anyone would freely give your perspective. This is a perspective, no? This is an opinion. This is not an official policy of anyone at all. This is more on the expert opinion and perspective on these issues, just to clarify everything. Yeah, this EDCA. What do you think of EDCA? Do we need to stop it, or we need to pursue it? What? Given the dynamics at the moment, it's creating some kind of discussion. And anyone? Oh, no one from the expert is trying. Okay, Dr. Cabanza.
I saw the hand of Dr. Romel first.
Go ahead, Chester.
Okay, Dr. Romel. I cannot see everyone. Oh my God. I mean,
if I may say, of course, the EDCA was, of course, the approved and approved by the Supreme Court, and I think it will end by 2020 next year.
Next year, yes.
Yeah. But of course, the reason why the Americans are very aggressive in their engagements with us is, of course, to lobby for that EDCA to be renewed, and knowing that they are extending also their strategy, because they have that Indo-Pacific, trying to experiment what would happen to the world, and of course trying to, in a way, quote unquote, contain China also, because they are power rivals. Then they are pushing for that. But part of the exploration is to add additional bases, because even before that EDCA, I think the AFP has already been redefining and reprogramming also their bases. There has been a study on that, and of course, prior to the EDCA, that has been the challenge for the AFP, because they are trying to expand also, because the strategic landscape has changed basically. But we'll see how they will reconcile all those agreements coming from the Americans and with what the Philippines would want to do also. So I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cabalsa. Yes, Dr. Banlawe. I'm sorry, Dr.
Yeah,
Banlawe.
I think, Chester is right that the Philippine Supreme Court already declared EDCA as constitutional, and therefore there is a legal basis for its stay. And apparently, the extension of EDCA is already a done deal with the acquiescence of the Department of National Defense to allow 5 more locations for the construction of American facilities, and also with our acceptance of the offer of military assistance from the United States of 70 million US dollars to be spent in 2 years. But for me, it's too small compared to what we received before. During the height of the global war on terrorism, we received an annual 150 million US dollars. But even though that's very small compared what Pakistan received during the global war on terror, Pakistan received at least 1 billion US dollars. So that's the issue. I think it's a done deal already that it will be extended. Because facilities have already been, locations have already been identified, and they are already negotiating whether in the extension of EDCA there will be some amendments for to accommodate the changes that have occurred. Especially with the expansion of the scope of activities. So that's the problem. But remember, as I written in my chat, EDCA is in fact providing the United States access to allow American troops, American warships, and American warplanes to be stations on rotational basis in the Philippines. And it's a creative way to establish military presence in the Philippines short of permanent basing arrangement, because that is against the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So that's so if we don't want EDCA to be renewed, then it's up to the Filipino people to take a stand. We need to take a stand the way the Filipino people did in 1991 when the United States lobbied for the retention of the military bases, but the Filipinos said no. That's why we terminated the military base agreement in 1992. So it's up to the Filipino people, and it's also up to the Senate, who might want to raise issue against it. But I think the EDCA, Chester, correct me if I'm wrong. Does it need Senate ratification for EDCA? No need,
kasi this one is a renewal.
Executive agreement, right?
Yeah,
Yes, it is an executive agreement, and this is renewal.
Executive agreement. I have an understanding that it was already a done deal at the level of the executive.
Well,
So just to clarify, Professor Banlawe, so from your understanding, and probably your understanding has some basis, of course. No, you will not have this understanding if it doesn't have basis. You're saying that EDCA renewal is somewhat a done deal, and even the 5 EDCA bases is already a done deal to that extent. So it's up to the Filipino people.
Yeah,
it's up to the Filipino people.
Well, I think I need to add this, the fact that there is no real political consensus with the legality of EDCA and BFA has been disputed by quite a number of senators in 2015, and of course the late Miguel Defensor Santiago. So the dispute is not actually resolved. It's only maybe de jure or de facto, but there is a lot of controversy over its legality. So I think that has to be stated.
Yes.
Number two, the only way we can get the people to approve or disapprove of it is a referendum, a people's initiative. But you have to get the political go signals for that from the Senate, the other political institutions.
Yeah, I think so. So it means like if that's the case, that there's no announcement coming from the office of the president, no? But just basing it on analysis, I think at the moment of what's going on, I think coming from Dr. Banlawe, there seems to be a done deal. Now, the thing here is, the next question that is very important is, if it is, let us say, a done deal, especially the 5 EDCA bases, which is our U.S. military bases, what is the implication of this vis-a-vis China? I mean, what's the impact of this? Not only with China, but even in the region, the ASEAN region for that matter. I mean, I want to hear a perspective coming from Dr. Henry, coming from a Southeast Asian perspective. What do you think of this, Dr. Henry, in terms of, of geopolitical situation and, other ASEAN countries? Do you think ASEAN countries will be like, okay with this, or they will see it from a very, how do you call that? They will have a different way of looking at things, but of course they will be quiet about it. What do you think? And of course, the other speakers can also provide their insights and inputs on this very important topic.
I think number one is that ASEAN understands Philippine position. And as Romeo has already said, it's probably a done deal. Now, ASEAN will look at in the operational levels, what will be the coverage? Because based on the original one in the 2014 agreement, Philippines seems to have very little control over it. And what ASEAN doesn't want is militarization of South China Sea, which is a very, very understood position of ASEAN's. Now, because first is this, we already pointed out that in the Philippine territorial definition from the Philippine side, it is 200 nautical miles. Okay, and now you have this issue even of Vietnam reclaiming so much land. So there will be not only just a ASEAN-China issue, Philippine-China issue, it can also be an intra-ASEAN issue now. And which could make things very, very complicated because everybody knows that China is a rising military power. So in the military talk lint, when we have a perceived potential threat, what are you going to do is that you do your part by building up your military. So if the whole South China Sea is being militarized, then that is something that definitely no ASEAN countries want to see. And actually, I really feel that is the implications in all the seminars I attend on this EDCA have not been discussed really very thoroughly. Because South China Sea territorial claim is a very overlapping and a little bit messy issues. Now, Chester already pointed out, if you talk about Taiwan, that's the red line of the red line. In all the occasions between the United States and China, China already remind them that they are even willing to go to war over it. Yeah. And what will be the Philippine position if that is true? So if Philippines can maintain the operational control over those additional 5 bases, I think China will be fine. But if Philippines will allow the U.S. unhampered use, which is actually the principle of the United States when they go to overseas bases, they always want unhampered use, then that'd be a very serious problem. But as I said, there's so many inside negotiations that we are not privy to it. So I will look at the visit of President Marcos Jr. to China in January as very indicative, because if Xi Jinping accepts his invitation very fast and come back also very soon, then that means they may have some agreements that is palatable to China. But if there is a lot of diplomatic language but no fixed date set, then China probably look at the April, what is the exact text? Because even the negotiations being done, Romeo has mentioned that there might be some appendix that can talk about safeguards. Okay. The original safeguard, I think China can live with it. But if there's unhampered use provisions in a way, then that is going to be a big problem. And for the ASEAN, I would say that the last thing ASEAN wants is militarization of South China Sea. And this year, Indonesia is the ASEAN chairman, and definitely that is the longest position of Indonesia in ASEAN affairs. That there is going to be no militarization of South China Sea. If you remember when AUKUS was announced, and they talk about this nuclear submarine, in ASEAN, only Malaysia and Indonesia really voiced very strong objections to it. So again, I would say the ASEAN other member countries are watching. We don't want the US to leave. We want everybody can live peacefully and be included in the ASEAN Indo-China framework. But this potential negotiation EDCA could be a tipping point to the whole situation in South China Sea. That's all I can say from my end.
Madam
Yeah,
Ana, if I may-
yes, yes, Kamintong, please.
Yes. I'd like to add one or 2 points. Number one, about the done deal. I think that is preempting the April deadline for the decision to be made to renew or to abrogate or end the EDCA agreement. I think this is reflected by some of the comments on the online from Peter Flores Serrano, your friend Ana, tungkol dito sa done deal question. No? What is he saying, referring to our friend Romel, that it is already a done deal. I think to accept it as a done deal is to be defeatist, and I think it is a mistake. I think we cannot allow the OIC, not even a regular Secretary of National Defense Chef, Faustino, to railroad the agreement as if it was approved already by the political authorities. And of course, that is a problem with President Bongbong Marcos, that he allows these statements without his imprimatur, but it drifts along as if it were, as described by our friend Romel, a done deal. It is not a done deal. In fact, it is incumbent upon citizens who disagree with these arrangements to take action. I don't know what citizens will be doing, but we, at the very minimum, will be encouraging action against of course, the continuation of the EDCA agreement, and therefore that would negate 5 additional bases if we nullify the agreement itself. So I think we must ask each and everyone what they think is the virtuous position. We must stand by virtue. Otherwise, we have no moral standard to provide. I think, again, about ASEAN's attitude, I think that is being made very clear. All the treaties and pacts that we have with our neighbors make it very clear we do not want the militarization of the region. Everybody is welcome to do trade, to help in prosperity, but not create tension and possible military conflict. I think that we should be very clear on that. And the Americans have to be taught a lesson that we take a stand. We cannot be wishy-washy because our own survival, our national welfare stands on this. And we are wiser than the greater masses who go by what they see in media. We are supposed to be the guide as intellectuals and philosophers, as academics of our society. We must take a stand. I'm sorry if I become an advocate in these discussions, but I think it has been to be said.
Yes, thank you, Kamentong, and thank you, Dr. Henry. I think before I recognize Dr. Banlawi, I just want to point out one important thing that Dr. Henry said, no? You talk about EDCA, whatever the status of EDCA at the moment, no, is operationalization. Because if I am not mistaken, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, any one of you, that in EDCA, I think in terms of control and operationalization of that, in terms of U.S. military bases, I don't think the Philippines has control. That's one thing I think that needs to be talked about or discussed. Because that's even, I think, one of the arguments of late Miriam Defensor Santiago, Senator, no? I am not sure about at the moment, because probably there are a lot of negotiations, but I think that is a very important point, no? Whatever the situation, whatever the status of EDCA, which is we are all trying to wait until it's clear, no? Because it's up in the air at the moment. So yes, Professor Banlawi, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Kamentong, for being nuanced when it comes to the issue of the done deal, and I admire your being circumspect on the issue. But I shared my opinion that it is a done deal because of 3 major developments. One, the result of the negotiations in Hawaii, where the Defense Department already agreed to provide 5 additional locations for EDCA. And you cannot construct facilities in 5 additional locations without the extension of the EDCA next year. Second is the offer of the United States to provide us military assistance of 70 million US dollars. And we already accepted, that we are waiting to receive this 70 million as military assistance. And thirdly is the planned visit of our president to the United States. And President Marcos will not visit the United States without giving the United States a good news. And for the United States, a good news to them will be the extension of EDCA. So that's the context on why I said it's a done deal. But if there are issues against EDCA, so it's up to the Filipino people to really decide whether they want this agreement to be renewed or not. And if you will read the original EDCA, there are still questionable provisions, but the Supreme Court declares EDCA in general as constitutional. Now, we have to pay attention on the new wording when the EDCA is renewed. Okay, let's see, because there are discussions on additional activities, because there is a provision in EDCA that the two parties can identify other activities other than humanitarian assistance and disaster response, maritime domain awareness, maritime security, and counterterrorism. So what are these other areas where the Philippines and the United States will conduct activities in those American military facilities inside Philippine bases? So that's the context of my opinion. Thank you. So it's only my opinion. No, I'm not stating the fact. I'm just expressing my opinion. Thank you.
Yes, it's understood, Professor Banlawi, because these are all analysis and perspective and opinion coming from different experts, and also, of course, our opinion are informed. No, it's not as if like we just get it from up in the air. Of course, there are bases to it, and thank you for sharing that basis and also your perspective on this. It's very important for us to really know and also to dig in. No, if Dr. Banlawi analysis is actually has currency, and we will see. On the other hand, it's 5 o'clock. I have one last question. I think that is very, very important, since the panel of experts are coming from 3 countries. But this is a general question, so everyone, I think, should at least give their perspective. So it's a general question, and you can take it and approach it the way you want. What do you think should be because this is foreign policy in the very first place, what do you think should be the approach of the current administration when you talk about foreign policy, given and in consideration that you have power rivalry of the 2 superpowers at the moment, China and the United States, and China is a rising, contending superpower. That's evident. No, we cannot deny that. So what do you think should be the Philippines' foreign policy direction, given that, of course, the current administration is still young and it's still new in power? It's only around less than 5 months or less than 6 months. So it has a lot of time to navigate the terrain when you talk about international relation and when you talk about geopolitics. So let me start with our friends coming from China, Colonel Wang, and then followed by our friend from Singapore, and then our Philippine expert, Dr. Cabalsa, Dr. Banlawi, and Sir Vic. And then, of course, Kamentong should also chime in. Okay, Colonel Wang?
Hi. I understand that as for the foreign policy, the new administration should just take experience from his predecessor. Just as the Philippine National Security Advisor Correa Carlos pointed out, Duterte's administration's foreign policy that is defined as height of pragmatism. Pragmatism, that means that Philippines can pursue its utmost national interest, moving between big powers without impair any of them's national interest, and especially the core interest. At the same time, consider and take the people's fundamental interest as the starting point, just as I mentioned in my presentation. To sustain its economic development, to develop prosperous economy, to make the people and society happy. That concludes my remark. Thanks.
Thank you, Colonel Wang. Thank you so much. Dr. Chan?
I want to recall an incident written by Benjamin Lim this morning in Strict Times. He said when 1975 President Marcos Sr. visited Beijing, the briefing paper in the cabinet is more than an inch thick. And that was at a time when you talk about power transition situations in this part of the world. And the briefing paper is already more than 1 inch thick. Now, President Marcos Jr. has to go to China in less than 3 weeks. And then the April deadline is coming very close. So this is a very difficult situation. And I think that everything he has to really consider is based on the Philippines' national interest. What is the best decision under such a time constraint? Now, the thing is a very sad thing is that in the Philippine newspapers, I don't even see anyone discussing about a potential impact intra-ASEAN, as we pointed out on the Vietnamese reclamation recently.
Yes.
So this is all our new elements, and I think the president has to really ask his staff to make a more thorough analysis, hopefully with the academics, but if the time is too short, maybe Professor Clarita is a very seasoned international geopolitics practitioners. Time is very short, but you have to make a stand. And then once the country get into problem with those looming superpowers, then all the consequences might take a lot of time to unravel. So I just hope that we can have good news coming out in the January visit and in the April conclusion of the EDCA extensions. So that is all I can say. There's so many things we do not know, and we just hope for the best.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Okay, let me call on Kamentong first. Then the next one. Kamentong, any concluding answer to the question? Your perspective.
I would like our online streaming audience to participate too. So instead of me speaking for myself, I would read one comment only from Verdun Tech. The U.S. has already started building the 5 additional military bases while still under negotiation. If that is not bullying, I don't know what is.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mentong, for reading the perspective of our audience, in different social media platforms. Thank you. Now, let me call on Dr. Banlawe, then followed by Dr. Cabalsa.
If you will look at the needs of the Philippines, especially our comprehensive needs, it's really difficult to deal with China and the United States, because China is an economic opportunity for the Philippines. But at the same time, we have security anxieties with China as a result of our territorial disputes and maritime jurisdictional conflicts in the South China Sea. And these security anxieties are in fact being provided, overcoming the security anxieties are being provided by the United States. So the U.S. continues to be our security provider, while China continues to be an economic provider. Now, if we will remove the problem between the Philippines and China, which is the South China Sea conflict, I think the Philippines will assert a more distant relationship with the United States, because the United States always reminds us of our colonial past. You know, we have a lot of colonial baggages against the United States, but our government still continues to adhere to the alliance because of our security requirements. In addition, you have to pay attention also to the role of the military. The military is one of the most powerful political institution in the country, and the military continues to be largely, for lack of a better term, pro-American, although they said we are pro-Filipino rather than pro-American, but honestly, they are pro-American institutions. And so we have to deal with the military for that, because the military is the one pushing for this pro-American agenda in our policy. But if we can resolve our conflict with China in the South China Sea, I think there will be more incentive for government officials to really re-examine our alliance with the United States. And I would like to share something that I know that I think it's safe to say publicly. You know, when it comes to the re-examination of Philippine-American Security Alliance, I participated in one of the discussions with the Americans. The Americans have this position. When it comes to the Mutual Defense Treaty, if you want a re-examination of the Mutual Defense Treaty, scrapping the Mutual Defense Treaty is out of the agenda of the Americans. That's why they feel bad that it is in our agenda, because it is one of our options to scrap the Mutual Defense Treaty. But for the United States, it is not an option. Okay, they are willing to open the negotiations for the Mutual Defense Treaty if we want to amend it, okay, or we want to have a new one, but they want to maintain the alliance. Okay, but for the Philippines, on the basis of what I know, we have the option not to maintain this alliance, but at the same time, we are compelled to embrace this alliance because of our security anxieties with China on the South China Sea issue. So, Colonel Wang, if we can resolve our conflict in the South China Sea, I don't think there is reason for the Philippines to embrace our alliance with the United States, because it's the only factor that's keeping us, that's compelling us to keep our alliance with the United States. That's why if we can really resolve our territorial conflicts and maritime jurisdictional issues, then there will be more reasons for the Philippines to eventually re-examine our alliance with the United States. And also, a message to Colonel Wang. Colonel Wang, if there is a way for you to tell your government to please slow down your military activities, military and paramilitary activities near to our maritime territories, because it's agitating not only our people, but also our lawmakers. And for me, that is not good for our bilateral relationship. So I hope that the meeting of President Xi Jinping and President Marcos Jr. in January next year will bear fruit for the improvement of our overall bilateral ties, not only from strategic comprehensive strategic cooperation, but to the level of a strategic partnership. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just short
Yes,
response.
Colonel Wang.
Short
Yes, Colonel
response. China's
Yes.
summoning action, just the response to forced to make some response to other countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Wang, and thank you so much as well, Dr. Banlawi. I will reserve the last person to speak to General Victor Corpus. No, so let me have
Don't forget Dr. Cabalsa.
Yes, actually, Dr. Cabalsa, I'll be recognizing now, and then the last person to speak, of course, before I close the whole webinar, is our good friend and Dr. Victor Corpus. General Victor Corpus, I'm switching. Dr. Cabalsa, yes, please.
Unmute.
Please unmute Dr. Cabalsa.
Sino pwedeng mag-unmute? Hindi kami ma-unmute.
He's not a co-host, so he needs to be unmuted. Dapat unmuted na siya sila lahat. Dr.
Okay.
Cabalsa.
Thank you, Ma'am Ana. Okay. There are a lot of ideas that has been offered to us this afternoon, and we try to label everything also. Sometimes this is like a journey for the Philippines where it has to reflect on what does it want. And generally, as we have seen, this is also an opportune time for the Philippines because this is very rare that you have opened the doors where big powers are trying to offer a lot of opportunities for the Philippines. And we hope that we should not miss these opportunities because there are a lot of options given to us right now. And sometimes it's confusing because of the many options, because we are not used to many options in the past. We were only offered 1 or 2 options before, but now you have poly options. And that has been an opportunity. That's the reason why we have to know what do we want as a Philippines. We do not know whether the Philippines would be a guarantee for our security. We do not know also if China can also be a blessing for us. But ultimately, if it's all about what we want as Filipinos, on how we want to carve our own foreign policy. Before the Marcos administration came into power, there has been a lot of debates already on the independent foreign policy during the previous administration, and many had been welcoming that it's the continuation of that. But it seems like the independence of the foreign policy has been debated, and it seems we don't see it because it is very costly for the Philippines to become independent in our foreign policy. Because what we have seen is that we are not a major power, although we are a middle power right now, but there are a lot of things to improve. But ultimately, once we reflected this journey, since we are a major actor in this region right now, we have to choose for peace and prosperity. Let's not choose to be part of being a guinea pig for conflict. But let's be more progressive. Let's be more affirmative of what we want. Because the goal of the government right now is to exit from becoming a low middle income economy to becoming an upper middle income economy. We should focus on that direction. And that is peace diplomacy. And that is economic diplomacy. So that should be the interest of the Philippines. So I know we are baffled right now because we are given a lot of options. But let's go back to what we want. Or maybe this is the best time for us to know what we want. So I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cabalsa. Yes, General Victor Corpus, sir, it's your turn. Thank you so much.
Unmute.
Please unmute, Sir Vic.
Check natin if we can unmute. Ayun, okay na.
Sorry.
Okay na, good.
Okay. I think that our national interest lies on neutrality, especially with regards to the geopolitical rivalry between the United States and China. Because there is a big chance, because of the ongoing strategy that is being implemented by the United States, called war with China, thinking the unthinkable. There is a big chance that war between China and the United States will break out, especially on the issue of Taiwan. And if that war takes place, and we have those 10 EDCA bases, those 10 EDCA bases will surely be used by the Americans as a springboard in their war with China. And the danger that I see is that in 2019, the United States withdrew unilaterally from the Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile Treaty. And if those EDCA bases either be used as a springboard to attack China by the United States forces, or the EDCA bases are used as for deployment of intermediate range nuclear forces, then we will be the main target. Because in retaliation, China will surely attack those bases. And if the attack turns nuclear, the retaliation will be nuclear. And as I said in my presentation, we will become the epicenter of a nuclear battleground between the superpowers. And that is not in accordance with our national interest.
Thank you, General Corpus. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank, because this is the closing part, no, and I'll be delivering the closing remarks. So thank you, friends and colleagues, for the question, and thank you as well to our distinguished panel of speakers for providing excellent answers to the question posed by our participants coming from different backgrounds, both in the Zoom and even outside, because they sent me some text and messages in different social media platforms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me close this webinar by saying that indeed, one of the many important questions in Philippine foreign policy that has been consistently asked by Filipinos and people in foreign policy circle ever since the Philippines received its independence from the United States in 1946 is, are Filipinos better off with the Americans or without them? Likewise, we cannot deny the fact that because of the Mutual Defense Treaty, or the MDT, the Disarmed Forces Agreement, or the BFA, and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, between the Philippines and the United States, the Philippines, for more than a century, has been a long-standing outpost for U.S. defense and security strategy in the Pacific. And given the evolving geopolitical realities in the Indo-Pacific region, learning from the lessons of the past, Filipinos need, I think, to reflect if indeed they want their country to stay and maintain these agreements as it is. I think Filipinos must reflect on the cost and benefits of having a U.S. military presence in the country and whether the U.S., in lieu of the MDT, has fulfilled its part of the bargain, and if the country stands to benefit from the continuous U.S. military presence through the EDCA and the BFA. Are important questions that indeed deserve some in-depth reflection. The Philippines is indeed at a crossroads with the U.S. At the moment, the current administration under the President Ferdinand Marcos is accordingly, that's the account, no, reviewing the MDT. Amid these processes, no, and of course there's a discussion on EDCA, amid this kind of processes that's going on, the Philippines must consider the lessons learned from history, and hopefully we will not repeat the past mistakes as Filipinos and as a nation. And one more thing, in terms of independent foreign policy, if we really want to pursue an independent foreign policy, we, I think, needs to be mindful of what does it mean to have an independent foreign policy. Because taking a side with one superpower over the other is not, I don't think it is independent foreign policy. So I think the current administration has really to reflect and see and probably, you know, create some kind of discussion with many people that is very much able to give advices and inputs for it to be able to come up with a very good foreign policy that is workable not only for the Philippines, but in relation to ASEAN, in relation to China, in relation to the United States. I think that is the challenge of the current administration. However he calls it, I mean, the president, he needs to, that's his challenge at the moment, because it's The geopolitical conditions of the Indo-Pacific region is quite challenging, and the reality is, of course, it's not easy for the president to navigate all these things. The Philippines this time around should take control of its destiny as a nation. It should strive to be truly an independent and sovereign nation that decides its course of action as it navigates the changing geopolitical landscape of the Indo-Pacific region. Most importantly, the Philippines should always put Filipinos' interests, or best put first and foremost the interests of the Filipino people and the nation more than other interests of other countries. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, and friends and colleagues, our webinar has come to an end. On behalf of the organizer of this webinar, the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies, in cooperation with the Integrated Development Studies Institute, thank you for participating for it's very important, actually, online forum. Likewise, again, I would like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to the panel of speakers who shared their expertise, their viewpoints, their experience actually on this topic. Thank you very much for gracing this timely webinar. And of course, I will not forget to thank our official media partner for this online forum, the Manila Times. Thank you very much for partnering with us. And we do appreciate all the support that you're extending to us, especially to me. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that everyone learns, and also I hope the leaders of the country also listen to us, no? And because I think they can get something and they can probably use as they navigate all of these important issues. But thank you again to the excellent and esteemed panel of speakers. And once again, a pleasant afternoon to all. Maraming salamat po. Thank you, Sheshe, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. And to our online friends who are there and posting so many questions and comments, thank you as well for being there and for participating even through online. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/digital to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Digital Edition. Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/digital to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Digital Edition. Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/digital to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Digital Edition.